There have been a few parts of my life that I remember in specific lifelike detail. I'm not sure if this is a blessing or a curse, as there are moments in my life which I want to forget completely. The most significant of that category was the play. I'm being quite vague when I say the play, as I've seen plenty of stage shows in my lifetime. Presentations in the form of movies usually bored me, but there was something about the stage that just made a show different. Live actors made the experience much more real, and ever since I saw my first stage play as a young boy, I was hooked. I moved to the city and saw shows whenever I could. Some stage plays can be rather expensive, but money was never really an issue for something I loved. However, I was especially drawn in when I saw the poster for The Hearts of the Young. I had seen a poster for the same show on the streets, not too far from the popular stage theatre in my city, but what attracted me to this performance was that it was free. Sure, it brought on assumptions it would be awful, but who doesn't enjoy free entertainment, even if it's bad? The show was being presented by the Masked Midnight Players, who I'd never heard of. I had done some research on them behind the show, but I couldn't find anything, which gave me the notion that they were rather new. And something I should mention before I go on is that the posters became quite numerous. As the night of the show became closer, it seemed that I couldn't stroll down a single block without seeing an ad stating that The Hearts of the Young, free show this Saturday. And I know that the group should have the right to make themselves known, but it got a bit ridiculous in my eyes. They placed ads on cars, put flyers in every mailbox possible, and even put a poster up on the visible but private property. It started to become a nuisance to some, until the day of the show finally came. The posters clearly had an effect, because word of the show already got out. Despite the fact that the show stated that the time of the performance was 10:30 p.m., the theatre was still rather crowded. Not as packed as I've seen it as other shows, but certainly more than the average night. And since the show is free, it had no problem attracting its crowd. But even still, I wasn't at the highest of expectation for the production's quality. And then the time struck 10:30, the lights dimmed throughout the theatre, and normally a show would have an introduction at this point, but this show skipped it, as the curtains immediately opened to the lit stage. The set for the scene was just a lady, sitting on a chair in center stage. The woman wore a bright yellow dress, white gloves, and black high heels. Now, this would appear to be normal, aside what she was wearing on her face. A pink mask that presented the face of a woman with a repulsing amount of makeup. The mask didn't look professionally made, as in the makeup details were poorly smeared across like it had been done in 5 minutes. And the actress just sat in the chair on stage for about 10 seconds, staring at the audience, and then throughout began to sob. Throughout the scene, the woman would appear to quickly glance to the left, off stage, looking at something, or someone. It didn't look like it was intended for the show, and she would turn her back quickly as if she had done something wrong. This happened at about 30 seconds, with the sobbing growing louder at random intervals. I was about to leave the theatre right then, until the curtains closed abruptly for the next scene. The audience looked around in confusion. This was clearly going to be a poorly done play, but it was also going to be a rather strange one, which caught the attention of most. I had half a mind to not waste my time, but I thought I might as well see what else the production had to offer. The curtains opened again to reveal a very similar scene. The same masked woman was sitting in a chair, crying. But there was another actor, who appeared to be male, so I'll address him as such. He wore a black formal suit, with a red and yellow tie, that appeared very out of place for the rest of his outfit. He was masked too, but he wore a large gas mask, a opposed to the female in the chair. He was just standing behind the woman in the chair, with his arms in front of him, and because of the mask, anybody couldn't really see his face. But I could have a sense of the expression on it, regardless. It felt like he was anticipating something, occasionally looking down at the wood with intent. And the stage was set like this for about 20 seconds, and then the curtains closed again. At this moment, I decided that I was done. The show was different, sure, but I had much better places I could waste my time. I was making my way to the exit, but then the curtains opened to a completely different scene. The set seemed to change way too fast, for the curtain was only closed for a few seconds before opening again. Everyone gasped at the sight. The same woman was on stage, still in the chair. Except she wasn't sobbing anymore. She was screaming. A dress that the woman had been wearing was torn. Visible cuts to her skin, on her legs and torso. She was tied to the chair. Her screams sounded muffled, as if something was covering her mouth behind the mask. Around her were even more actors and actresses, 11 in total, though it was hard to distinguish which ones were male and female. And they all wore formal attire, similar to the gas mask man, who was now sitting at a piano near the left side of the stage. The characters around the girl also wore masks, ranging from strange to downright hideous. The best way to describe them would be greatly disfigured faces, not torn, but arranged in completely inconceivable ways. Some had noses placed on the forehead, large, bloodshot eyes placed where the mouth should be, and others didn't have certain facial features at all, just mouths or eyes blatantly scattered about. Their heads were all turned to the girl in the chair, in a manner of eager anticipation, I had to guess. And then the gas mask actor looked at each one of the men and women surrounding the girl, and then looked at the audience. Then he began to play the piano. An overly upbeat and obnoxious jingle tune. I hadn't heard it before in my life, but it sounded very similar to some sort of annoying Christmas melody that one would hear on the radio constantly. I only heard the specifics of the song for a moment, and then the curtains closed a few seconds after. As the curtains were shut, the music was still playing. It was drowned out by a series of stomps, and then sounds of struggle. It was a barrage of noises that all happened in a short time. Sorry if I'm not being specific, but the woman's screams were louder than any time before. Screams of and sounds of the chair breaking to pieces. The ambience of a crowd pushing and shoving one another. The audience began to gasp and scream, as there were very faint sounds of gnawing, ripping, and the occasional aggressive growl from somebody behind the curtain. And the woman's screams stopped only after a minute, perhaps less. Everybody in the theatre was completely silent. Nobody knew what to think. What was the point? Was this even a show? Was this even a production? I was only hoping that it was some kind of organized joke, or a startlingly good show made to make some sort of sadistic point. And the piano tune still played before the next scene opened up, or what was left of it. The curtain opened to an empty stage. The gas-masked actor at the piano bloodied pieces of the chair on the center of the stage, with more red smears around it, and aside from what appeared to be blood. There was no trace of the woman who was sitting there before. And then the gas-masked man finished playing and walked towards the center stage. He looked towards the stunned audience, bowed formally, and exited to the right of the stage. The curtains closed, and everybody was silent. I suppose everyone was just as hopeful as I was to see some kind of conclusion to this so-called show, but there was none. The gas-masked man left, and that was it. The theatre was filled with panicked whispers and calls to family and the police. The police arrived quickly, did a quick investigation, and evacuated the theatre. And it was closed for more than a month after an incident. And I had no intentions of seeing another show. For a while, anyway. But then following the night of the show, I of course had nightmares. I imagine the entire audience did. I still clung to speculations that the show was just some kind of setup made to scare its audience in the most realistic and grueling way possible. I almost fully believed this. Until the authorities finally released a report. The crying and screaming woman, the one in the chair, wasn't an actor. She was a lady, missing shortly before the show, and she'd only been missing for a few hours, so there had been no reports. No idea that she was missing, and nobody was able to identify because of the mask she was wearing on stage. And her muffled voice was assumed to be because of a sort of mouth gag. And the blood on the stage was confirmed to be hers. The actors involved with the production had not been identified. But when the police searched backstage after the show, no trace of the suspects were found, aside from a single note placed by the exit. The hearts of the young always taste best.